With theaters closed, movies are dropping left and right on streaming services and on demand. So today I'm going to stop and rank all 10 June 2020 new releases that I saw from the worst to the best. I was actually really surprised I actually saw 10 movies this month. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Let me know which June movies did you see and which were the best and which ones were the worst. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. As we go into this, I've actually talked about some of these movies before, whether I reviewed them on my main channel or I've talked about some of them on Instagram and over on Patreon. Every movie that I see in a given month, I'm not able to talk about on the main channel, so I try and post some quick reviews over on Instagram and then full reviews over on Patreon. So like The King of Staten Island, Be Water, EuroVision, You Should Have Left. I have full reviews for those over on my Patreon page. If you join at any level, you can unlock them. The link is down below in the description, and let's get started. Easily coming in last place is Artemis Fowl. This is a stain on the career of pretty much everyone involved. Between the source material, the studio that produced it, which is Disney, and the cast and crew in front of and behind the camera, there is just no excuse for how this movie turned out. In fact, that's the most entertaining thing about this film, is that that group of people made a movie like this. It feels like they set out to make like a 2.5-hour Harry Potter-esque epic, and then in the editing room, they're like, this isn't working. Let's just make it like 90 minutes long, chopped an hour out of the film and had Josh Gad come in, record some voiceover to kind of fill in all the gaps. And in doing all of this, it commits like 3 major movie mistakes. The first one is that it tells you the story, tells you about the characters instead of showing you the story and letting their actions let you know who they are. The second one, it's just for the most part pretty incomprehensible. Like, you can't follow what's going on if you haven't read the books, because it's just throwing so much information at you so quickly. And the third is that it feels an awful lot like this movie is just a setup for the sequel that's the movie that you actually want to see. As you get to the end of it, even my 8-year-old son said, "Hey, I thought we were about to have a big battle where they took that person out and went to that world." Nope. Not in the movie. They saved that for the sequel that we're almost certainly never going to get. Number 9, You Should Have Left. I'm disappointed I have this one so low on the list because I really enjoyed Kevin Bacon in the film. Both his character, his performance, the backstory, and kind of layers that he had. I enjoyed those aspects of this film, but it was supposed to be a psychological horror film, and the pieces just don't fit together quite right. This is another one that felt like the screenwriter-director David Koepp, who is like a Hollywood A-list screenwriter, worked on Jurassic Park, the Spider-Man movies. It feels like he wrote a 2-hour movie and then they went, no, we want it to be 93 minutes long, and cut everything out that kind of explains how all the pieces work. So there's parts where the married couple in it go from really happy to suddenly he's paranoid to suddenly they're screaming at each other and heading in 2 separate directions. All this stuff kind of with the spooky haunted house aspects, it kind of tells you what's going on, but not in remotely a satisfying way that makes any sense of it. And so at the end you have moderately good family drama with a really solid Kevin Bacon in it, and then you have a very run-of-the-mill, forgettable haunted house film, and they mash the pieces together, cut everything out that explains how it fits, and you just get kind of a dull, forgettable film that does not satisfy. Next up is EuroVision Song Contest, an odd mix of really catchy songs, an interesting setup for a film, some powerful emotional moments, and a whole lot of incredibly stale Will Ferrell comedy. When it comes to the music in this film, it's been on repeat. The soundtrack has been on loop in my household since we watched it Friday night, and almost on that level, that kind of elevates the film for me because the songs are so catchy that you want to listen to them again. Likewise, the idea of the EuroVision Song Contest seems like prime material for a movie like this, and at certain character moments and payoffs, it hits you in the right way. It absolutely hits the emotional notes, but it's a comedy, and all of the comedy in it relies on the same bag of tricks that Will Ferrell has been going to for about 25 years now. And instead of finding something new and interesting inside of EuroVision to make it funny, there's just a whole lot of Will Ferrell penis jokes. And I really think that if they'd given this film to a different creative team and made a comedy that was more organic, it would have been a much better film. Number 7 is Irresistible, a well-intentioned project from Jon Stewart of The Daily Show fame that has a good message inside of it and does a pretty good job of staying on topic for being a political film in the year 2020. If you don't know about this film, essentially it's about a Washington, D.C. campaign manager played by Steve Carrell that decides to go to help a candidate in a small town running for mayor to try and strengthen the Democratic Party's kind of rural base. Essentially, and it's basically an exploration of kind of the nature of how campaigns are run in the modern era in this context of this city. And what I appreciated about it is that so many political comedies these days just kind of go for all the low-hanging Trump fruit. And this movie doesn't do that. It stays on topic. It's about how the system and the money involved in it that kind of led to the current environment that we're in, rather than picking on specific candidates or cultural topics that are specific. It's about the system in general. In that regard, I really appreciated that. It explores its idea pretty well. On the flip side to that, though, I didn't feel like it found its own comedic footing, though. It doesn't go for this easy low-hanging fruit, but it doesn't replace it with something either. And so a lot of the jokes fall flat. There's this whole bit with a billionaire at one point in time that just should have been cut straight out of the movie. Like, it's bad. It's a bad scene that should have been deleted very early on in the process. And even some of the jokes that do land aren't that good. But the real big problem here is that inherently, the two leads of the film, played by Steve Carell and Rose Byrne, are intentionally incredibly unlikable and unrelatable. They're designed to be that way, to show how out of touch these campaign managers actually are as they're trying to pander to normal people. And because of that, you don't really have anyone you're rooting for. You don't know what you want, who to win or anything like that. So it communicates its message well, but it's deeply flawed. Then we have Becky. So I watched this movie a week and a half ago, and I'm still not quite sure what I think about this film. Its basic plot is a home invasion film where comedian Kevin James makes a hard twist from his normal thing and basically plays a sociopath trying to get this key to this whole treasure, and he is willing to kill anyone, anything in his path to get it. And so he's playing this psycho, and kind of the twist inside of it, that where it distinguishes itself is its willingness to hurt children and show children doing wickedly violent things, where Becky turns this whole thing around and it goes hard R Home Alone on these home invaders, with this little girl being the one brutalizing these guys, in which case this is not a movie for everybody. A large percentage of people would be utterly disgusted by the content of the film. If you kind of like home invasion films and ones that really push the boundary, there's a good bit in here to, well, schlock value for you to enjoy in that regard. I didn't love the film. I can have fun with some home invasion films. I loved You're Next from almost 10 years ago now. This one, the novelty of this little girl tearing people up was a lot of fun. That was the big positive for me. Kevin James did a good job as the psycho guy, but the characters themselves I didn't think were quite interesting enough, and there wasn't quite enough carnage for me to really love it. But as a novelty watch, it did its job for me. In 5th place is My Spy. It can be charming at times and painfully derivative at others. This is exactly the movie that you think it is from the trailer. It's a big, larger-than-life action hero hanging out with kids. So we've done it before with The Pacifier, we've done it before with Kindergarten Cop, and now it's Dave Bautista's turn to do it. Probably on the positive when it comes to kind of the humor inside of it, what I thought it did well is at times it has some very self-aware humor, and so Dave Bautista as the spy is teaching this little girl about how to be a spy, But what he's actually doing is he's teaching her how to do action movie cliches. I thought that was kind of a fun, clever thing to do with it. There's some nice actors sprinkled throughout the whole film that I enjoyed watching. But really, your ability to enjoy this film is entirely determined by how much you enjoy watching Dave Bautista wade versus your tolerance for blatantly derivative films that you've seen before. It's kind of like hearing a cover song of a song that you've heard 1,000 times before. It just comes down to, do you want to hear Dave Bautista sing this song? For me, I kind of dug that. I'm still on the Dave Bautista kick, so I wanted to hear him sing the song. So I had enough fun with it, but it is exactly a paint by your numbers one of these movies. In fourth place is 7500. This is an Amazon Prime original starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt as the pilot of a plane that's taken over by terrorists. But kind of the gimmick here, what makes it kind of interesting and unique, is the fact that the story is told entirely from the cockpit. Entirely watching him in that seat. It doesn't cut to the outside of the plane as it takes off. It doesn't cut to the back of the plane as everything's taken over. You're seeing it from the perspective of this pilot. You know what he knows. You see what he sees. And I thought that was a nice little twist on a very familiar plot. You know, we've seen Air Force One, Passenger 57, Executive Decision, and any other movies about people taking over a building, but putting it entirely in the one room makes it for, if you like these types of movies, these types of thrillers, it's a good enough watch. I don't know that if I'd watch it a second time because it is so slow, because you're just right there. You see everything happening through him looking at this TV screen over here, everything happening in the cabin. And then you kind of move through the story. Parts of it are just him sitting in a chair looking at this guy in this tension of like, can he move his hand enough to hide something? Will this happen? And so it moves at a pretty slow pace, but the novelty of seeing this type of story told one time with someone like Joseph Gordon-Levitt that can definitely pull off, like, it also kind of depends on, can you watch him for 90 minutes straight? I absolutely could. I don't know that I'd want to watch this a second time, though. Real quick, before I give you my top three, remember to tell me what you saw in the month of June down below in the comments section. What have you loved? What have you hated? What did you skip entirely in regards to all of these home release June 2020 films? Also, remember, I've already talked about some of these over on my Instagram account. I have a lot of exclusive reviews over there and behind the scenes content, a bunch of fun stuff. And over on my Patreon page, I've done full reviews for several of these. King of Staten Island, Be Water, EuroVision, You Should Have Left, as well as a whole bunch of other exclusive top 10 videos. Join at any level and you gain access to all of it. In third place is Be Water, the ESPN 30 on 30 feature-length documentary about Bruce Lee. So this one came out about a month ago. I don't normally have ESPN. I actually signed up for ESPN for the sole purpose of watching this documentary because I was interested in it, as a movie fan, as a martial arts fan. Of course, he is a legend. And so seeing how ESPN would tackle all of that, I was quite fascinated with it. And how much would they kind of romanticize his story? How much would they kind of tell it accurately? And what elements would they include? So I checked it out, and I thought they did a really good job of giving a fact-based kind of story of his life. Because even beyond the stuff that people know about him, I mean, he was a child actor, he was a teacher, he was a trainer for a bunch of A-list celebrities, and then he became the Hollywood movie legend basically after he died. And so it does a really nice job of kind of exploring that, and kind of the way it's told is orally through the people that knew him that are still alive. So it has a very personal bent to it, as it's not just kind of talking head pundits. It's not just people giving their opinions. These were his friends and his family sharing his life story. The thing that kind of frustrated me about it is that it's kind of told non-linear in a way that was really odd. Like, it starts in like 1971, then it goes back to like 1963, then it goes to his childhood, then it goes forward. I just thought that was kind of an odd way to do it. And they also didn't show the faces of the narrators of it that were telling the stories until the very end of it. I think it probably would have been a little bit more personal if you were showing his wife's face as she's talking about her husband, having her daughter visually seeing her discuss her father that died so many years ago. But overall, a really good way to kind of get the vibe for his actual life story, what he valued, and also kind of how his story intersected with kind of the civil rights movement of the 1960s. In second place is Defy Bloods, another one that's a little bit frustrating for me because I felt like I had two wildly different experiences watching it. During the first half, it's kind of like a hangout film with these Vietnam vets going back to Vietnam and just a lot of them talking to each other in hotels, in hotel rooms, in bars, on boats, and just kind of really kind of taking its pace, taking its time, letting you get to know everybody as we hang out, as they catch up, as we learn, see little flashbacks of what kind of happened back in the war. And then as soon as they get where they're going, it turns into like this tense, edge of your seat heist film. And I really dug the second half. It absolutely had me captivated. First half had me checking my phone a little bit. Now, I was watching it like 2:30 in the morning, so I needed to do a little bit to keep myself awake. But the first half was a little bit too slow for me. Also, kind of with almost any Spike Lee project, I wish he was a little bit more subtle in the way he communicated stuff. I wish that he used story and his characters to communicate his message rather than just being so overt and in your face. Now, that's his style, that's his thing. Subtlety is not the game here. I don't mind him having a message, and I think there's some powerful things inside of what he was trying to say, but when it turns into just like preaching at the audience from a soapbox, I don't like that, even though I'm okay with everything he was trying to communicate. So this was a movie that the end result, I liked enough of it that it's still very high up on this month. And it also was a month that had a lot of very mediocre films. But I just wish he could have like trimmed that first hour and reined back in on some of the soapboxing. But coming in first place is The King of Staten Island. I'd held off a little bit on watching this one because I'm not the biggest Judd Apatow or Pete Davidson fan, and paying $20 to rent it just felt like an awful lot. But I kept hearing enough things about it that it kind of made me interested enough, and I checked it out. And it really worked for me. Obviously, more of a subtle comedy and character study than an overt laugh out loud comedy. There weren't that many jokes where I was laughing out loud, but I was amused by the interactions more and captivated by the character arc as you have this person that you're just learning about why is he just so stuck with more potential than what he's actually doing. You can tell that there's something there, but he just won't apply himself whatsoever. And so as you kind of dive into like how he's never fully processed what kind of happened in his childhood with his father, and this journey is what kind of snaps him out of it to see a different perspective, and that perspective was what was holding him back. I really dug all of that about perfect for this movie, as it's quasi-autobiographical. Bill Burr, of course, is always great and fun. Marissa Tomei. And so in the end, I really dug the movie. I don't know if it'll be my top 10 for the year, but it is #1 for June. If you want my more in-depth take on some of these movies, the link is down below in the description for my Patreon page. Join at any level and you can see it. Likewise, if you want those quicker takes, they're over on Instagram. Once again, link is in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.